The glass shattered at 12:47 a.m. Security cameras went dark, and by dawn, Richard Rawlings' empire was crumbling faster than a blown engine at 200 miles per hour. But here's what nobody knows yet. What police discovered inside that garage wasn't just vandalism. It was a message, a warning, and possibly evidence of the biggest betrayal in automotive television history. You're about to witness the complete destruction of a legend. But first, you need to understand how we got here. Because this story, it started long before that fateful night in Dallas. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, if you've ever wondered what happens when fame becomes a prison, if you've ever watched someone self-destruct in real time, then you're in the right place. Because what happened to Richard Rawlings could happen to any of us. The only difference? Most of us don't have cameras rolling when our world falls apart. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why police were called, what they found, and how a single discovery inside that garage revealed secrets that Gas Monkey Garage never wanted you to see. This isn't just another celebrity scandal. This is the anatomy of an empire's collapse. Let me paint you a picture of North Dallas on that Tuesday night. The air was thick with August humidity, the kind that makes metal expand and engines run hot. Gas Monkey Garage sat quietly under the flickering neon sign that had become a beacon for car enthusiasts worldwide. The compound that Richard Rawlings built from nothing more than hustle and horsepower. But success, as Richard himself once said, is just another word for having more problems than you can handle in public. The day had started normally enough. Richard rolled into the shop around 10 a.m. in his signature black Dodge Challenger, the same swagger, the same confidence that made him a television icon. His crew was already hard at work, sparks flying from welding stations, the rhythmic pounding of hammers shaping metal, the sweet symphony of internal combustion that built his fortune. Sarah Martinez, who worked the front desk, later told investigators that Richard seemed different that day. Distracted, she called it, like his mind was somewhere else. He spent most of the afternoon on phone calls, his voice getting louder with each conversation. By 6 p.m., when the camera stopped rolling and the crew headed home, Richard was still there, still pacing, still making calls. The security footage shows him alone in the shop at 8:30 p.m., standing next to a half-finished 1967 Mustang Fastback. He's holding what appears to be a letter or document. He reads it twice, crumples it up, throws it in the trash. Then he retrieves it, smooths it out, and reads it again. What was in that letter? We're gonna find out. But first, at 9:15 p.m., Richard's phone rang. The call lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Security audio picked up fragments. Can't keep doing this. And warned you this would happen. And finally, tonight. By 10 p.m., Richard was no longer alone. Vehicle registration records show a black Ford F-150 entered the compound at 10:03 p.m., Texas plates, registered to a shell company called Lone Star Acquisitions LLC. The truck parks in the blind spot between two security cameras, a spot that someone with intimate knowledge of the property would know existed. Two figures exit the vehicle, one tall, wearing a baseball cap, the other shorter, carrying what appears to be a duffel bag. They walk directly to the private garage bay, the one where Richard keeps his personal collection. The door opens immediately, no forced entry, no broken locks. Whoever these people were, they had access. The next 90 minutes remain a mystery. Security cameras show nothing, but neighbors would later report sounds, metal being moved, voices raised in argument, and then silence. At 11:47 p.m., the Ford F-150 left the compound. 90 minutes later, the glass shattered. Fame is a beautiful beast until it turns on you. And for Richard Rawlings, that beast had been showing its teeth for months before that night in Dallas. The warning signs were everywhere, but nobody was paying attention, except for one person who was keeping a very detailed record. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand the pressure cooker that Gas Monkey Garage had become. On the surface, everything looked perfect. The television show was in its 12th season, merchandise sales were through the roof, and Richard's personal brand was stronger than ever. But beneath that polished exterior, cracks were forming. The first crack appeared in February, when longtime fabricator Tommy Torch Rodriguez walked off the set mid-filming. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. His replacement lasted 3 weeks. Then came the issues with the Rawlings whiskey line, quality control problems that nearly resulted in a federal investigation. Then the lawsuit from a former business partner claiming Richard had stolen intellectual property worth millions. Each incident was handled quietly, swept under the rug with non-disclosure agreements and carefully worded press releases. But insiders say Richard was feeling the strain. He started showing up to work later, leaving earlier. The easy charm that made him a natural on camera became forced, mechanical. He was running on empty, one crew member told us anonymously. You could see it in his eyes. The spark was gone. But the real breaking point came when Richard discovered someone close to him had been secretly documenting every crack, every failure, every moment of weakness. The someone was Lisa Chen, Gas Monkey's former head of operations. Lisa had been with the company for 6 years, rising from administrative assistant to Richard's right hand. She knew every deal, every contract, every skeleton in every closet. She was also, according to sources, keeping detailed records of what she saw as Richard's increasingly erratic behavior. A 400-page dossier obtained by investigators paints a picture of a man slowly losing control. Late-night angry phone calls to network executives, heated arguments with production staff, financial decisions that made seasoned accountants nervous, all documented with dates, times, and witness statements. But Lisa wasn't just collecting information, she was shopping it around. What she found buyers for would rock the automotive world to its core. The dossier made its way to Richard's competitors first. Other shop owners, other television personalities, anyone who might benefit from Gas Monkey's downfall. But that wasn't enough for Lisa. She wanted something bigger. She approached a major automotive magazine with an exclusive exposé, The Real Richard Rawlings, How America's Car King Lost His Crown. The story would detail financial troubles, substance abuse allegations, and claims that many of Gas Monkey's most famous builds were actually completed by other shops and rebranded. The magazine was interested, very interested. But before the story could run, Richard found out, and what he did next would make that night's events inevitable. The confrontation happened on a Monday morning in July. Richard called Lisa into his office and laid the evidence on his desk. Emails between Lisa and the magazine. Bank records showing payments from competitors. Phone records proving she'd been feeding information to rivals for months. You want to destroy everything I built, Richard reportedly said. Fine, but you're going down with it. Lisa was fired immediately, but the damage was done. The magazine still had the story. Richard's enemies still had ammunition. And Lisa had one final card to play. The letter Richard found that Tuesday night was from Lisa's attorney. A simple message, final warning, kill the story or face the consequences. Richard chose consequences. Every empire has its Rubicon, ASE, that line that once crossed changes everything forever. For Richard Rawlings, that line was spray-painted across his garage wall at 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in August. But the 5 words painted on that wall weren't random. They were a quote from Richard himself, from an interview he gave 5 years earlier. You can't buy loyalty. Those 5 words in dripping black paint would become the epitaph for Gas Monkey Garage as the world knew it. But their significance went deeper than anyone initially understood. In 2019, during a magazine interview promoting his whiskey line, Richard had been asked about his biggest business lesson. His response was immediate. You can't buy loyalty. You can buy compliance, you can buy silence, but real loyalty, that's earned through respect, trust, and treating people right. The interviewer followed up. Have you always lived by that principle? Richard's pause was telling. I try to, but success makes you forget sometimes what got you there. Someone remembered that interview, someone who felt forgotten, and they came back to remind Richard of his own words in the most devastating way possible. The vandal or vandals didn't just spray paint those words randomly. Security footage analysis revealed they spent nearly 20 minutes carefully crafting each letter, each drop of paint. This wasn't rage-fueled destruction. It was calculated, methodical, artistic in its cruelty. But the paint was just the beginning. What police discovered when they processed the scene was evidence of something far more sophisticated than simple vandalism. Fingerprint analysis revealed at least 4 different sets of prints on surfaces that had been recently cleaned. Tool marks on damaged cars were made by professional-grade equipment. The pattern of destruction followed a logical sequence, as if someone was making a point with each act of sabotage. But the most chilling discovery was hidden in plain sight, and it would take investigators 3 days to decode its meaning. Among the scattered papers and overturned equipment, crime scene photographers captured something that initially seemed insignificant: a Gas Monkey Garage business card, placed carefully on Richard's desk with a single word written on the back in the same black marker used for the wall graffiti. Remember. Remember what? That answer would come from the most unexpected source. A former Gas Monkey employee who'd been secretly recording conversations for over a year. Jake Morrison worked at Gas Monkey for 8 months in 2023 as a paint specialist. Talented, hardworking, and according to his termination paperwork, let go for attitude problems. But Jake had been recording conversations throughout his employment, initially for his own protection, later because he sensed something bigger was brewing. The recordings, turned over to police after the incident, paint a picture of a workplace where loyalty was demanded but rarely reciprocated. Employees talking about delayed paychecks, promised bonuses that never materialized, credit for their work given to others. And through it all, Richard's voice, sometimes concerned, sometimes dismissive, but always focused on the bottom line. One recording, dated 3 weeks before Jake's termination, captured a conversation between Richard and his business manager about problem employees. Just document everything. Richard's voice is clear on the recording. Make it look like performance issues. We can't have people questioning decisions or talking to media. Jake's voice responds, "What about loyalty? What about taking care of the people who built this place?" Richard's response would prove prophetic. "Loyalty is a luxury we can't afford right now. This is business, not a friendship club." But Jake wasn't the only one recording. And the other recordings would reveal something that would make the garage incident look like child's play. Trust is the foundation of any empire, but it's also its greatest vulnerability. And in Richard Rawlings' case, the people closest to him were the ones collecting the most damaging evidence. Among those recordings were conversations with Richard's own family members, discussing plans that would shock the automotive world. The most devastating recordings came from an unlikely source: Richard's own brother-in-law, Marcus Webb. Marcus had been managing Gas Monkey's merchandise operations for 3 years, trusted with financial information that even longtime employees never saw. He was family. He was safe. He was also secretly working with Lisa Chen. Phone records subpoenaed during the investigation revealed hundreds of calls between Marcus and Lisa in the months leading up to Richard's discovery of the magazine story. Text messages painted a picture of a coordinated effort to gather evidence of financial irregularities, workplace violations, and what they characterized as Richard's megalomaniacal behavior. But they weren't just collecting information, they were actively creating situations to document. One text message from Marcus to Lisa would make prosecutors consider criminal charges. "Got him drunk enough to admit the Camaro build was faked. Video uploading now." The message, sent at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday in June, referenced a conversation at Richard's home during a family barbecue. Marcus had secretly recorded Richard discussing how certain builds featured on Fast and Loud were actually completed by outside contractors and styled to look like Gas Monkey work. The admission, if proven true, would violate network contracts, sponsor agreements, and potentially constitute fraud. But more than legal implications, it would destroy the authenticity that was Gas Monkey's brand. But Marcus's betrayal went even deeper. He was also stealing. Financial records obtained during the police investigation revealed systematic theft spanning 18 months. Marcus had been creating fake vendor accounts, approving payments to shell companies he controlled, and skimming profits from merchandise sales. The total? Nearly $400,000. But Richard knew. He'd known for weeks. The same forensic accountant who discovered Marcus's theft had briefed Richard on July 15th, 3 weeks before the garage incident. Richard's response, according to meeting notes, was calculated. Let him think he's getting away with it. I want to see how far this goes. Richard was setting a trap, but he wasn't the only one. Marcus and Lisa knew they were running out of time. The magazine story was being fact-checked. Richard was asking questions. Security at Gas Monkey had been quietly upgraded with new cameras and recording equipment. They needed something dramatic to shift the narrative. They needed Richard to lose control publicly. The plan they hatched would backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. Sometimes the prey is smarter than the predators realize. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person everyone thinks is losing is actually 3 steps ahead. Because while Marcus and Lisa thought they were orchestrating Richard's downfall, Richard was orchestrating theirs. The evening of the garage incident, Richard made a series of phone calls that seemed random at the time, but revealed a clear pattern when investigators analyzed them later. He called his lawyer, his accountant, his insurance company, and most tellingly, a private security firm specializing in corporate espionage. At 7:30 p.m., 90 minutes before the mysterious visitors arrived, Richard received confirmation that hidden cameras had been installed throughout the property, including locations that weren't covered by the regular security system. These cameras were recording everything with audio. Richard knew they were coming. He was ready. But what he discovered that night exceeded even his darkest expectations. The 2 visitors weren't Marcus and Lisa, as expected. Security footage from the hidden cameras revealed something far more sinister. A professional crew, equipped with specialized tools and detailed blueprints of the property. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment confrontation. This was a contracted operation. Voice analysis of the audio recordings identified one of the intruders as David Diesel Murphy, a former Gas Monkey employee who'd been terminated 2 years earlier for allegedly stealing parts. The other voice was unidentified but spoke with technical knowledge of the vehicles and equipment being damaged. But the most chilling moment came when one of the intruders answered a phone call. Phase 1 complete. The message is delivered. Time for Phase 2. Phase 2 would involve something that could have killed Richard if he'd been there alone. The hidden cameras captured the intruders tampering with the garage's electrical system, specifically the main breaker that controlled lighting and ventilation. They rigged a system that would create an electrical fire, timed to start approximately 4 hours after their departure. If the plan had worked, Richard would have arrived the next morning to find Gas Monkey Garage burning to the ground, destroying evidence of their break-in, along with millions of dollars in classic cars and equipment. But Richard had anticipated this possibility. Because 15 minutes before the electrical fire was set to trigger, Dallas Fire Department received an anonymous call reporting a gas leak at the facility. Richard had called in the false alarm himself, ensuring fire department personnel would be on scene to discover the rigged electrical system before it could cause damage. The mysterious electrical problem that delayed the investigation? That was Richard buying time for investigators to process evidence before his enemies realized their plan had failed. Truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it's buried. And in Richard Rawlings' case, the truth was more explosive than anyone could have imagined. Because the night of the garage incident wasn't an ending. It was Richard's opening move in a game of chess that had been 3 years in the making. While police processed the crime scene and media speculated about Richard's downfall, Richard was in his attorney's office, laying out evidence of a conspiracy that reached far beyond Marcus and Lisa. The dossier he presented contained financial records, recorded conversations, and documented proof of a coordinated effort to destroy Gas Monkey Garage from within. The conspiracy involved 6 people, including 2 current employees, a former network executive, and a competitor who'd been secretly funding the operation. Their goal wasn't just to embarrass Richard or steal money. They wanted to force Gas Monkey into bankruptcy so they could purchase the assets at auction prices. The evidence Richard had been collecting would result in federal charges being filed within 72 hours. By Friday morning, FBI agents were serving search warrants across Dallas and 3 other states. Marcus Webb was arrested at his home on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. Lisa Chen was taken into custody at DFW Airport, attempting to board a flight to Mexico with $85,000 in cash. But the biggest shock came when agents arrested David Murphy at his auto repair shop in Fort Worth. A search of his facility uncovered detailed plans for what prosecutors called Phase 3 of the operation, the systematic sabotage of Gas Monkey's television production, including plans to contaminate parts with substances that would cause spectacular on-camera failures. But even Richard didn't anticipate who the real mastermind behind the conspiracy would turn out to be. The money trail led investigators to a shell company called Lone Star Acquisitions LLC, the same company that owned the black F-150 captured on security footage. The company's ownership structure involved multiple layers of legal entities, but at the center was a name that shocked everyone who knew Richard personally: Aaron Kaufman. Richard's former partner, the mechanical genius who'd helped build Gas Monkey's reputation before leaving the show in 2018, had been secretly financing the conspiracy for over 2 years. Bank records showed payments totaling more than $750,000 to various participants in the scheme, all traced back to Aaron's own automotive businesses. The motive, according to text messages recovered from Aaron's phone, was devastatingly personal. "He stole my life's work and put his name on it. Now I'm going to take his life's work and put my name on it." The message, sent to Lisa Chen in March, revealed that Aaron believed Richard had minimized his contributions to Gas Monkey's success and profited unfairly from builds that were primarily Aaron's design and execution. Other messages detailed Aaron's plan to acquire Gas Monkey's assets after forcing Richard into bankruptcy, rebranding the operation as ArcLight Fabrication, and launching a competing television show that would essentially be Fast and Loud with different branding. But Aaron made one critical mistake that would ultimately save Richard's empire and destroy his own. In his eagerness to document Richard's supposed failings for the planned magazine expose, Aaron had been secretly recording conversations during his time at Gas Monkey, including discussions about builds, finances, and business strategies that were protected by network confidentiality agreements. When Aaron provided these recordings to Lisa as evidence of Richard's misconduct, he inadvertently documented his own violations of his departure agreement with Discovery Channel, which included strict non-disclosure clauses about show production. Discovery's legal team moved swiftly to protect their intellectual property, and Aaron found himself facing lawsuits that would dwarf anything he'd planned for Richard. Within a week of the arrests, Discovery filed a $50 million lawsuit against Aaron for breach of contract, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to damage their programming. The network also moved to block Aaron from working in television production for 5 years and demanded the return of all materials related to Fast and Loud. Aaron's own businesses, already leveraged to fund the anti-Richard conspiracy, couldn't survive the legal onslaught. ArcLight Fabrication filed for bankruptcy protection within a month. The hunter had become the hunted. Sometimes destruction clears the way for something stronger. Sometimes betrayal teaches lessons that success never could. And sometimes, just sometimes, nearly losing everything helps you remember why you started building in the first place. Because what rose from the ashes of that Tuesday night wasn't just Gas Monkey Garage, it was a completely new Richard Rawlings. The first sign of change came in Richard's public statement, released exactly 1 week after the arrests. Instead of the slick, corporate language fans expected, Richard spoke directly to the camera from the same garage bay where the vandalism occurred. "I've spent 15 years building an empire, but I forgot to build the foundation that empires need to survive. Trust, respect, loyalty earned, not demanded. This week, I nearly lost everything because I stopped being the person who deserved to keep it." But words were just the beginning. Richard's actions in the following months would prove his transformation was genuine. Every employee who'd been terminated in the previous 2 years received a personal call from Richard, not from HR, not from lawyers, but from Richard himself. He apologized for decisions made in haste, explained the pressures that had led to poor judgment, and offered reinstatement to anyone who wanted to return. Jake Morrison, the paint specialist who'd been recording conversations, not only came back, but was promoted to shop foreman with a 20% raise. He didn't just apologize, Jake told reporters. He asked me what he could do differently. Nobody had ever asked me that before. The financial changes were even more dramatic. Richard restructured Gas Monkey's profit-sharing program, giving employees actual ownership stakes in the company's success. He established a transparency policy requiring all major business decisions to be explained to the full staff. Most importantly, he created an anonymous feedback system where employees could raise concerns without fear of retaliation. But the most surprising change was what Richard did with the garage wall where "You can't buy loyalty" had been spray painted. Instead of painting over the graffiti, Richard had it preserved under a clear, protective coating. He hung a plaque next to it with the full quote from his 2019 interview, adding a new line, "I forgot this once. Never again." The wall became a pilgrimage site for automotive enthusiasts and business leaders alike. Richard would often bring visitors to see it, using it as a teaching moment about the dangers of success without substance. Within 6 months, Gas Monkey Garage's employee retention rate was the highest in its history, and productivity had increased by 40%. But perhaps the most meaningful change was invisible to cameras and customers. Richard began eating lunch with different crew members each day, not to check up on them, but to listen. He instituted Failure Fridays, weekly meetings where anyone could share mistakes they'd made without fear of punishment, turning errors into learning opportunities for everyone. The transformation was so complete that when Discovery offered to extend Fast and Loud for 3 more seasons, Richard negotiated for his crew to receive co-producer credits and residual payments, sharing wealth that had previously been concentrated at the top. But the ultimate vindication came from the most unexpected source. Aaron Kaufman, facing financial ruin and potential prison time, reached out to Richard through his attorney. The conversation, which lasted nearly 3 hours, was recorded with both parties' consent and later excerpted in a documentary about the case. "I spent 2 years trying to destroy you," Aaron said, "because I thought you'd stolen credit for my work. But watching how you handled this whole situation, you became the person I always hoped you were." Richard's response revealed how completely he'd changed. "You were right about some things, Aaron. I did take credit I shouldn't have. I did let success go to my head. Maybe it took nearly losing everything for me to remember that the best builds happen when everyone gets credit for their work." The conversation resulted in something nobody expected, a partnership. Rather than pursuing maximum penalties, Richard testified as a character witness during Aaron's sentencing hearing. He spoke about their history, Aaron's genuine contributions to Gas Monkey's success, and his belief that people deserve second chances. Aaron received probation instead of prison time, and the 2 men announced a limited collaboration. Aaron would consult on special builds for Gas Monkey, receiving full design credit and appropriate compensation. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Every legend needs its defining moment, that inflection point where everything changes, where the story reveals its true meaning. For Richard Rawlings, that moment wasn't his first television contract or his first $1 million sale. It was the night someone spray painted his own words on his garage wall and forced him to confront who he'd become. Because what happened in that garage wasn't just about Richard Rawlings. It was about all of us, and what success can cost if we're not careful. Today, Gas Monkey Garage operates differently than it did before that Tuesday night. The neon sign still flickers, the engines still roar, and Richard still hustles deals with the same passionate energy that built his empire. But something fundamental has changed. Visitors notice it immediately. The atmosphere is different, lighter, more collaborative. The toxic pressure that had been building for years has been replaced by something that feels more like a family business than a corporate machine. And the numbers prove it works. Gas Monkey's revenue has increased every quarter since Richard's transformation, but more importantly, his employee satisfaction ratings are the highest they've ever been. The conspiracy that nearly destroyed Richard's empire ultimately made it stronger. The betrayals that could have ended his career became opportunities for genuine growth. The night that seemed like his lowest point became the foundation for his greatest success. But perhaps the most powerful legacy of that night is the example it set for other business leaders. Richard's willingness to acknowledge his mistakes, learn from them, and change his behavior inspired a wave of similar transformations across the automotive industry and beyond. Which brings us to the final revelation, the one that puts everything we've learned into perspective. The magazine article that started the whole conspiracy was never published. After Richard's transformation and the arrests of the conspirators, the editor made an unusual decision. Instead of running an expose about Richard's failures, they commissioned a feature story about his redemption. How Richard Rawlings lost his empire and found his soul became the magazine's most read article of the year. It spawned speaking engagements, business school case studies, and a book deal that Richard ultimately donated to a foundation supporting small business owners. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source, a handwritten letter from a viewer who'd been struggling with similar challenges in his own business. "Dear Richard," the letter began, "I was about to fire half my employees because I thought they were the problem. After watching your story, I realized I was the problem. Today, I apologized to my team and asked them what I could do better. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had, and the most important. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to become the leader people deserve." The letter was signed "A Fellow Work in Progress" and included a photo of a small auto repair shop with a handwritten sign, "Loyalty Earned Daily." That garage wall still stands today, with those 5 words preserved under glass. You can't buy loyalty. Thousands of people have made the pilgrimage to see it, to understand its meaning, to learn from Richard's journey, from empire builder to soul searcher to genuine leader. But there's one more secret about that wall that nobody knows except Richard and the person who painted it. The DNA evidence collected from the spray paint revealed something that investigators never made public. The person who painted those words wasn't one of the conspirators. It wasn't Marcus or Lisa or Aaron or any of their hired help. It was Richard himself. In a moment of clarity during that chaotic night, Richard had grabbed the spray paint and written the words that would save his empire by destroying his ego. The truth, revealed only in Richard's private journal entries that were donated to a business ethics archive, shows that after discovering the full scope of the conspiracy against him, Richard had a choice. He could play the victim, let his enemies destroy themselves, and emerge vindicated but unchanged. Instead, he chose transformation. The spray paint was his declaration of surrender, not to his enemies, but to the truth about who he'd become and who he wanted to be. The words were a promise to himself and everyone who depended on him that he would remember what really mattered. In his journal, Richard wrote, "Tonight, I discovered that my enemies were right about me. I had become someone who demanded loyalty without earning it, who took credit without sharing it, who built an empire on other people's backs and forgot their names. They tried to destroy me, but I realized I'd already destroyed the person I used to be. Time to build him back, better this time." And that's why this story isn't really about Richard Rawlings at all. It's about every entrepreneur who's let success change them. Every leader who's forgotten that people aren't assets to be managed, but human beings to be valued. Every person who's built something beautiful and then watched their ego poison it from within. Richard Rawlings' story is our story. The choice he faced in that garage, between defending his empire and admitting his failures, is a choice we all face whenever success starts to separate us from our humanity. The 5 words on that wall aren't just spray paint. They're a reminder that the things worth building can't be bought, can't be demanded, and can't be faked. They have to be earned every single day through actions that prove we remember where we came from and why we started. You can't buy loyalty, but you can earn it. You can lose it. And if you're willing to do the hard work of becoming the person who deserves it, you can earn it back. That's the real discovery police made in Richard Rawlings' garage that night. Not evidence of a crime, but proof of a redemption. Not the destruction of a legend, but the birth of something better. A leader who learned that the strongest foundations aren't built from concrete and steel, but from trust, respect, and the daily choice to be worthy of the people who believe in you. The gas monkey still roars, but now it roars for everyone.